Hey everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to be building a larger version of the original Streamside Paludarium I built about 4 months ago. My container is about 5.5 inches wide. I designed the stand as a 6x6 inch square that's 2.5 inches thick. I cut out the pieces of particle board and sanded down their edges. I attached the pieces together with wood glue, but I ended up using spring clamps to hold them together anyway. Next, I have a few 1.5 inch wood screws and a countersunk drill bit. I pre-drilled the holes for all the screws. And then drilled the screws in. I ended up splitting the particle board a couple of times. So far, the stand structure is quite strong. I ended up removing the angle brackets as I figured out I did not need them. I filed down part of one of the split boards and then cut the leg of the table out of a 1-inch wood dowel. I then marked on the top of the stand where the leg will go. I drilled a countersunk hole in the top of the stand. And then down through the top of the leg. I then drilled the screw through the top of the stand into the end of the leg, and then drilled a hole to attach a screw through the side of the leg too. I then attached the side of the leg to the stand for extra stability and strength. Since the stand doesn't look very good now, I cut some fiberboard pieces with a wood texture to the dimensions of the stand. I then glued the pieces to the stand and let the wood glue dry for a few hours. Here's the completed stand for the paludarium. I had to move the angle bracket in the side of my shelf to make room for the stand. I then screwed the stand to the shelf from 2 spots inside the shelf, and then 2 spots up from the bottom. Now it's time to build the paludarium that the stand was built for. I'm going to attach a sheet of foam to the bottom of the container to keep it stable. I thoroughly cleaned off the bottom of the container and the foam sheet to give the silicone a clean surface to adhere to. I put silicone all over the bottom of the container and pressed it into the foam sheet. Once the silicone cured, I used a box cutter to trim off any extra pieces of foam and silicone from the outside of the container. Then I thoroughly cleaned out the inside of the container to give the silicone a clean surface to stick to. I used a wax pencil to mark where I should apply the silicone. I covered the entire inside back of the container with silicone. This will provide the expanding foam with a more textured surface to stick to later on. I smeared the silicone around with a foam paintbrush and let it cure for about a day. Since this paludarium will be relatively top-heavy, I siliconed a small hook to the back of it to attach it to the shelf later on. I can now apply the expanding foam to the back of the container. I let the foam cure for a few hours, and then attach this large branch using more expanding foam. Once the foam cured, I carved and tore away any excess foam. It was very difficult getting to the bottom of the container, but I eventually got the foam carved like I had wanted. I filled this large gap with an extra piece of foam. Then I covered that paintbrush from earlier with silicone and smeared the silicone all over the foam. I then started placing river stones all over the silicone. Then I poured lots of pea pebbles and sand into the container, covering the rest of the exposed foam. I pressed everything into the silicone, poured out any extra sand and gravel, and let it cure overnight. I rinsed it out with water to remove any excess sand. Now I can attach the light for the paludarium. I drilled a small hole and then glued the light into the shelf. Once I moved the paludarium onto the stand, I poured about a ½ inch of sterilized garden dirt, then about a ½ inch of sand into the container. I stuffed clumps of Java moss in between the spaces in the branches. I filled it up with dechlorinated tap water, and then added a small piece of a hornwort. Lastly, I added the terrestrial plants. I added large star moss, hypnomoss, liverworts, and several other larger plants.